what is going on, guys? Lottery Stocks here, back at it with another GameStop video. This is actually for GameStop and AMC, but GameStop in particular. I do think AMC comes to play in this, and I'm just going to go over it with you guys for the first time. And this is the House of Cards Part 2 on Reddit. This is DD, done by Autobit. If you don't see any of these, you guys really should go check them out. I think this is probably top tier DD for GameStop every time it comes out. So we have Citadel Has No Clothes, the Everything Short, and the House of Cards Part 1 that all come into play. And we're going to get right into this for you guys. So, too long didn't read, no freaking way I can do that. So, pretty much, he's saying this is too important to drop that. Right before this starts, take it with a grain of salt. This is someone else's DD, just an opinion, no financial advice. Pilot. I was looking into GameStop when all of this began. Most of my time was spent researching the pandemic's impact on the economy. I'm talking about the economic steam engine that employs people and puts food on their tables, especially the small businesses that were executively steamrolled by COVID lockdowns. It was scary how fast they had to close their doors. Scroll through this a little bit. I spent a lot of time looking at companies like GameStop. Brick and mortar businesses were basically running out of bricks to shit. Frankly, GameStop looked a lot like the next Blockbuster, and it just seemed like a matter of time before they went under. Had a DFV not done his homework, it's possible we wouldn't have a rocket to hodl or a story to toddle. Whoever has had a short position with GameStop was probably thinking the same thing. The number of shares that can be freely traded on a daily basis is referred to as the float. GameStop has 70 million shares outstanding, but 50 million shares represented the float. With a small float like this, a short position of 20% becomes significant. Heck, Volkswagen got squozed with just 12.8% short position. So let's use these numbers to walk through an example of how this works. That is pretty much what I've said before, guys, in one of my videos when people are thinking AMC has tons of more potential than GameStop to squeeze. I don't think that's true. I think they are both pretty even because GameStop does have a significantly lower float than AMC. So let's see this. Assume Volkswagen has 100 shares outstanding. If 12.8% of the company has been sold short, then 12.8 shares, let's just say 13, must be available to purchase at a later date, assuming Volkswagen doesn't go bankrupt. However, Volkswagen had a float of 45%, which meant there was no real strain to cover that 12.8% short position at any moment. However, when Porsche announced they wanted to increase their position in Volkswagen, they invested heavily. The kicker was that Porsche owned 43% of Volkswagen shares, 32% in options, and the government owned 20.2% in plain terms. It meant that the actual available float went from 45% down to 1% of outstanding shares. Let's revisit our scenario with 100 shares outstanding and 13 shares sold short. What happens if only one share was available to cover instead of 45? Well, this. As you guys can see right here, he's talking about a squeeze. This is insane. This is just insane. Okay, so if you guys are following along right now, he's pretty much saying the last and final share, if this was the case, would look, this is what would happen. And I think you can kind of see what he's getting at. GameStop is or was the victim of the price suppression through short selling. I discussed this topic with Dr. T and Carl Hegberg in our AMAs. Every transaction has two sides, a buy and a sell. Short selling artificially increases the supply of shares and causes the price to decline. When this happens, the price can only increase if demand exceeds the increase in supply. I started looking closely at GameStop after confirming their reported short position of 140%. It's important for me to explain this is why sorry guys, it's important for me to explain this, why this is so much different than the Volkswagen example. 140% of GameStop's float was sold short. There were 50 million shares in the float, so 140% of this was equal to the 70 million shares the company has outstanding. This means at least 100% of the shares outstanding has been sold short. Now compare that to Volkswagen, where the short position was only 12.8%. Simply put, it's mathematically impossible to cover more than 100% of a company's outstanding stock. The peak of the Volkswagen squeeze was reached when the demand of shares became surpassed by the supply of those shares. Here, demand represents 12.8% of their stock, which must be available to close the short position. With only 1% of shares available, this guaranteed a squeeze until the number of shares available to trade could satisfy the remaining short interest. When a company has a short position with more than 100% of total shares outstanding, the preceding argument is thrown out the window. Supply cannot surpass demand because the company can only issue 100% of itself at any given time. Therefore, the additional 40% could only be explained by multiple people claiming ownership of the same share. Surely this is a mistake, right? I thought this level of short selling was impossible until I saw the number of short selling violations issued by FINRA. As we go through these FINRA reports, there are a few things to keep in mind. FINRA is not a part of the government. FINRA is a non-profit entity with regulatory powers set by Congress. This makes FINRA the largest self-regulatory organization, SRO, in the United States. The SEC is responsible for setting rules which protect individual investors. FINRA is responsible for overseeing most of the brokers collectively referred to as members in the U.S. As an SRO, FINRA sets the rules by which their members must comply. They are not directly regulated by the SEC. FINRA is their own person. I've went over that before. So pretty much if the SEC is filing something or FINRA is filing something, you guys have to realize the SEC has to file the same exact thing for it to actually come and play. FINRA investigates cases at their own pace. When looking at the date initiated on their reports, it is not synonymous with the date of the occurrence. Many times FINRA will not say when a problem occurred, just resolved. It can be years after the initial occurrence. The DTC participant report is littered with cases that were initiated in 2019 but occurred in 2015, etc. Many of the violations occurring today will take years to discover. FINRA can issue a violation for each occurrence using a one-to-one format. When it comes to violations like short selling, however, these occurrences can last months or even years. When this happens, FINRA issues a violation for multiple occurrences using a one-to-many format. I discussed this event in Citadel Has No Close, where one violation represented 4 years of market fuckery. What's shitty is that FINRA doesn't tell you which violations are which. You have to read each line and see if they mention a date range of occurrence within each record. If they don't, you must assume it was for one event. Brutal. FINRA's investment portfolio is held by the same entities they are issuing violations to. Let that sink in for a minute. So, I know this is a lot, guys, just to go over one topic, but remember, this is going to piece together piece by piece, and it's all going to come together. If you want to skip through the video to the important parts, I don't know if you're going to be able to find them, but you guys can try and do that. But here we go. I just want to get everything covered so we don't miss anything. State your case. Can you think of a reason why short sellers would want to understate their positions? Put yourself in their situation and imagine you are running a hedge fund. You operate in a self-regulated environment and your records are basically private. If the SEC asks you to justify suspicious behavior, you really don't have to provide it. The worst that could happen is a slap on the wrist. I wrote about this exact same thing in Citadel Has No Close. They received a cease and desist order from the SEC on December 10th, 2018 for failing to submit complete and accurate records. This occurred from November 2012 through April 2016 and contained deficient information for over 80 million trades. Their punishment, $3,500,000. So why even bother keeping an honest ledger? Now suppose you short a bunch of shares into the market. When you report this to FINRA, they require you to mark the transaction with a short sale indicator. In doing so, FINRA builds a paper trail to your short selling activity. However, if you omit this indicator, FINRA can't distinguish that transaction from a long sale. Who else would be there to hold you accountable for covering your position? This is especially true for self-organizations, clearing organizations like Citadel, because they are less parties involved to hold you accountable with record keeping. If FINRA thinks you physically own these shares and sold them long sale, they have no reason to revisit the transaction in the future. You could literally pocket the cash and dump the commitment to cover. Going to skip over some of this. I combed through the DTC participant report and found enough dirt to fill the empty Jason's is Ken Griffin's Soul. Take a guess what their most common short selling violation is. I'm going to assume you said failing to properly make a short sale transaction. For the record, I just wanted to say I called this in March when I wrote Citadel has no close. Citadel, one of the highest, blah, 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 etc., etc. After seeing how many participants received the same penalty, it made sense. There are only roughly 240 participant account names on the DTC's list. Shit you not, I looked at every other short selling violation that was published on brokercheckfinra.org. To be fair, I eliminated participants with only 1 or 2 violations related to short selling. There were plenty of bigger fish to fry. I literally picked the first participant at the top of the list and found 3 violations for short selling. Let's see. ABN AMRO Clearing Chicago LLC. AACC is the 3rd largest bank in the Netherlands. They got popped for 3 short selling violations, one of which included a failure to deliver. In total, they have 78 violations from FINRA. Several of these are severe compared to their violations for short selling. However, the short selling violations revealed a much bigger story. Here it is, guys, right here. I'll let you guys give a second to read that, or you can pause the video. I'm going to scroll down now. So ABN AMRO submitted an inaccurate short interest position in the NYSEC and FINRA and lacked proper supervisory systems to comply with particularly everything. So pretty much what's happening, guys, is that when hedge funds, I think what he's getting at is when hedge funds are short selling and are violations, they're not even like scared to short sell and break these violations due to the penalty not being crazy, and also it's easy to get away with. That's what I think he's getting at right here. You guys can see all of this. He has examples after examples after examples. This has been going on for 8 years. Without a doubt, this is a great example of violation where the misconduct. All right, let's see what he's getting at. 2, call him out. When FINRA publishes one of their reports, the granular details like numbers and dates are often left out. This makes it possible to determine how systematic a particular issue might be. For example, if you know that XYZ failed to comply with FINRA's short interest reporting requirements, your only conclusion is that the violation occurred. However, if you know that XYZ failed to comply with FINRA's short interest reporting requirements on 15,000 transactions during 2020, you can start investigating the magnitude of the violation. If XYZ only completed 100,000 transactions in 2020, it means 15% of their transactions failed to meet requirements. This represents a major systematic risk to XYZ and the parties it conducts business with. I spent some time analyzing Apex Clearing Corporation. After I left ABN AMRO, Apex is the 8th on the list and the second participant I found with an evident short selling problem. In 2019, FINRA indicated a case against Apex for doing the same shit in ABN AMRO. However, the magnitude of this violation really put things into perspective. I got a small taste of how fucked this house of cards truly is. Like I say, guys, everything is not everything is clear and simple at all. It like aggravates me how fucked the system is, and we're just here trying to just do our best to just trade and do things by the book, and we just like, this is what we got to do, right? Like, we got to come together and fucking bleed these hedge funds. All right, let's see what he has. Let's break this down step by step. I think this is the importance. Apex had an issue for 47 months where certain customers recorded their short positions in an account which was not being sent to FINRA. It only takes a few wrinkles on the brain to realize this is a problem. The simple data tells us just how bad that problem is. When you see the term settlement days, think T+2, 2 business days. Apex follows the T+2 settlement period for both cash accounts and margin accounts, which means that the trade should be clear 2 days after the original trade date. When you buy stock on Monday, it should settle by Wednesday. Okay, quick math. There are only 252 trading days roughly in 1 year after removing weekends and holidays. Throughout the 47-month review period, we can safely assume that Apex had roughly 987 settlement dates. In other words, 256 Misstated reports over 47 months is more than one misstatement a week for nearly 4 years. Tell me again how this is trivial. The wording of the sample settlement section is a bit ambiguous. It doesn't clarify if there were only 2 settlement dates they sampled or if they were only settlement dates with reportable issues. Honestly, I would be shocked if it was the latter because auditors don't examine every record, but I can't be certain. Anyway, FINRA discovered 256 short positions consisting 481,000 shares were incorrectly excluded from the short interest report. In addition, they understand the share count by 879,000 in 130 separate short positions. Together, this makes 1,360,516 shares that were excluded from the short interest calculation. When you realize nearly 1.5 million excluded shares were discovered in just 2 settlement periods and there were almost 1,000 dates to choose from, it seriously dilates the imagination. Once again, FINRA's wiped the state clean for just 140,000. Let me skip through this. Failure to report short interest positions or failure to indicate a short sale modifier. If the violations contain additional information, it's because that citation actually listed additional information. It does not represent an all-exclusive list of short selling violations for these participants. Let's see what he has. He has examples right here. $10,000 fine, $150,000 fine, $90,000 fine, $30,000 fine. 250. Oh my god, these are a lot. These are a lot of examples. This is not good. Let's see what we got. This is the end of it. I'm going to stop at H because I'm tired of writing. Hopefully you all understand the point so far. We are only 8 letters into the alphabet and have successfully buried Ken to his waist. The system that is used to mark the proper transaction type is obviously broken. There, I said it. The system is indubitably, undoubtedly, inevitably fucked. Regardless of the case, fraud or negligence, there are too many firms failing to accomplish a seemingly simple task, the consequences of which are creating far more shares than we can imagine. It's gigantic domino effect. If you fail to properly mark 1 million short shares and a year goes by without catching the problem, it's already too late. They're like the fucking replicators from the Stargate. In each of these examples listed above, the short interest on the stock was understated by a number of shares excluded, and that was just a handful. Knowing this, how can someone look at evidence and say it's trivial? No one really knows how systematic the issue is because it is too deeply incorporated in the market that it has become the system itself. Therefore, there is obviously something much deeper going on here. How does one argue against this severity of these problems after reading this? There are far too many things that don't make sense and far too many people turning a blind eye. The only conclusion I keep coming back to is that people with money know what's going on and are desperately trying to keep it under wraps. So in effort to prove this, I looked for violations that showed their desperation to protect the fucked up system. Buckle up. House of Cards Part 3 coming soon. I'm uploading it now. We'll link ASAP. Alright guys, so you may see House of Cards 3 on here if you want to keep up to date. But if this guy, if this guy was in court or wherever with them on like a GameStop meeting, he would really wreck. he would really wreck some people. So that is pretty much all I got for you guys. I hope you can leave a like on this video and drop a comment. What do you think about the House of Cards Part 2? I love you all. Subscribe to the channel. Lottery Stocks out.
How we gonna get to this bag when we focus on gunplay, but trapping is all that we got. All of us gonna make it one day like church.